Today I'm going to be talking about the question of what happens when you add an extra ad to a web page. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about what happens when the ad is added onto a page where there is an already existing ad. We'll focus on the desktop web experience, although largely it's the same on a mobile experience, but on a desktop experience is obviously more landscape to play with, and this is a more common practice. I'm going to be examining it from the attention of three different groups: the publisher, the advertiser, and the user of the web page. There are very similar dynamics to those that I have already outlined in the video on ad rotation, and so I'm going to link to that video here. But in this particular case, if we look at a web page, you'll get a better sense for what I'm talking about. This is an example where the publisher has two identical ads over the right-hand side of the page. Let's assume that there was previously only one ad. And what you see is that the second ad was added directly below the first. And let's consider our three groups. The user is pretty straightforward. If you're a user who dislikes having ads on the page, adding an extra ad is certainly not going to help you. If you're one of those rare users that likes ads, possibly you like having an extra ad added. But now to the advertiser. If there's only one ad on the page, then the advertiser doesn't have any competition. However, when the other ad is added to the page, the potential click-through rate may drop significantly. In fact, it is not unreasonable to assume that it may drop by as much as 50%. Similarly, if it's a brand advertiser, they may see a drop-off in the perceived impact of their ad. Now, to the publisher. Let's think about the publisher perspective and what happens when they actually get into loading the ads on the page. If this were 2015 and the ads were being loaded onto the page, then the sales team of that publisher would be out talking to advertisers and trying to sell the ad space. They would be representing how many ads there were on the page, and they'd have to have a conversation with the advertiser around how those ads were loading. However, it's not 2015. We're almost a decade further down the road, and what we see is that everything has moved programmatic. There isn't usually going to be a sales team having the conversation with an advertiser directly about the ads that are on a page or how they're each performing. One of the key things is the information that is being passed through to the advertiser. The advertiser may or may not even be aware that an extra ad has been added to the page. In fact, they may not be aware that an extra ad has been loaded to the page until they start to see a deterioration in the performance, and they may even think that there's something else that is driving that poor performance. Because adding ads to a page is relatively a rare occurrence by a publisher, the advertiser may not be aware that this has happened on the publisher side, and they may attribute it to something else. Now, another major problem that can occur is the interaction between the ads on the page, and these take a few different flavors. One is an example where the advertiser gets two of their own ads loading on the page. Maybe the ads are exactly the same, maybe they are different, but at the least the advertiser would look at that and say, that's probably a waste of money. Why am I buying two ad slots exactly beside each other? A second use case that can occur is in the case where an advertiser's ad may load, and we may have a different situation where an ad that's distracting may load beside it. In an example, we'll see that Safeway ad loads, and an ad beside it loads where there is a medical condition. If I'm Safeway, I probably don't love this ad experience. And the third use case, and possibly the most problematic, is if a competitor adds loads directly beside one of their direct competitors. Think Coke and Pepsi. That would be an example where both advertisers are going to be unhappy. So what could happen? In an extreme case, the advertiser may turn to the publisher and say, we are deeply unhappy with this experience. We are going to remove all of the advertising from that web page or potentially from the site in general. So problems from the advertiser perspective generally fall into the two categories of a decline in the performance of the ads or problems with the content surrounding the ad, in this case specifically the other ad that's sitting beside the advertiser. So if advertisers dislike it and users dislike it, why do publishers insist on doing this? And again, I've done it, so I'm guilty. The reason is obviously more money. And so the question is, how much more money is a publisher going to make from doing this? Ideally, one would be hoping that the new ad is going to load and get the same type of pricing or yield as the ad that's already on the page. Unfortunately, that's not usually the case. It's not usually the case because the two ads together are obviously inferior to the previous ad. So the publisher, while they're essentially doubling their ad impressions, is likely to only see a revenue uptick of somewhere between, say, 10 and 40%. Now, I appreciate that that's a large window, but it gets to the fact that a lot of it comes down to the desires of the advertiser, the understanding of the performance of the different ads, and frankly the communication around the launch. So one can safely say that yes, adding that additional ad to the page is going to help revenue, but it's not going to help it enough to be able to offset the fact that you're seeing significant price declines. And so another word of caution to publishers looking at embarking down this path is that you need to be able to explain it, both internally and potentially to the investor community if you're a public company. If you're a public company and you add a new ad to the page, what you're going to see is a significant decline in the ad pricing. This may be information that you already have to either disclose to your investors or they are able to back into from looking at some of your site metrics. And so be ready with an answer as to why you're seeing the decline in the yield and the pricing on your sites. So in summary, a publisher is going to add an extra ad to a page because they believe that it's going to lead to more revenue. However, in practice, it's not going to lead to anything like the doubling of revenue on that web page that a publisher might hope, and may lead to significant issues with advertisers in terms of their desires to work with that publisher going forward. I hope you enjoyed this content. Thanks.